I don't care if it's been overplayed. Nobody has said it better than George. He's got to start us off. Here we go.
Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right.
So then, of course, we have to ask ourselves, who are they? Well, while reading Americans Anonymous, Restoring Power to the People, One Citizen at a Time by Mel K, on page 159, there is this really excellent chart here, and we are going to go over this together and break it down section by section and get a little bit more clarity on who the F are they. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that I personally am not in a position to corroborate all of this and prove that all of this is as such. But I'm going to take a moment to just appreciate the structure of this and see how well it maps to observed reality. So there's a lot here, but it's broken down into sections. We have the policymakers, the policy distributors, the enforcers, the propagandists, and then you and I down here as the public. So let's go through this here. The global public-private partnership, starting off with the Bank for International Settlements up here at the top, who ultimately control the money supply and thus global markets, trade, and national economies. Next, we have the central banks, coordinated by the BIS, going direct and directly funding government spending. Next up, we have the think tanks and global representative groups. These formulate the policies to achieve the global public-private partnership objectives. Resource allocation determined by the BIS and central banks, but they are working in partnership with the think tanks and other representative bodies to convert that into global political policy. The examples are the World Economic Forum, Council on Foreign Relations, Club of Rome, Chatham House, Rockefellers. I imagine that there are more, but you can look at all of this as these are the makers of the ideas, the source of the ideas that shape the world, basically. Then we have the distributors of these ideas. These organizations and bodies take policy directives from the policy makers and distribute them to the policy enforcers. So the distributors are the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the IPCC, being the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the World Bank, World Health Organization, various philanthropists, global corporations, and non-government agency or organizations. Next up, the policy enforcers. They exploit or work with the selected scientific authorities to justify the policies they are required to enforce. And you all can keep in mind the things that happened with COVID and what you got to observe and ask yourself how well this is mapping so far. We have the national government, civil service, NHS, police, military, local governments, etc., and then selected scientific authorities. Some of these you may not be aware of. I'm definitely not with nerve tag. I don't know what this is. CDC, got that. NIH, familiar with that. American Medical Association, etc. Again, policy enforcers. Next, we have the policy propagandists. The propagandists and hybrid warfare specialists are tasked with convincing the public to accept and hopefully believe in the policies. They use psychological manipulation, disinformation, misinformation, censorship, and propaganda. So this would include mainstream media, various fact checkers who play themselves off to be as such but aren't, social media platforms, and so on. Those are the policy propagandists. And then there's us way down here. We are the subjects of the policy which cascade down through the GPPP system. We largely pay for the system through taxation and public borrowing. The system is designed to exploit us, but we are an increasingly unnecessary component as the global public-private partnership look to seize the global commons. So, when you hear Carlin talk about they, here it is. And that's probably why so many of us go off the rails and struggle to have structured conversations about this type of thing, because it is just so large and multifaceted. So I'm very hopeful that this chart will help guide your conversations with others as to who they are. And at the bottom of this chart, she does give credit to Ian Davis and his website. That's spelled IAINDAVIS, iandavis.com, if you'd like to check out his work. All right, now we're going to get into the strategy part of all of this. So let's recall what George said.
But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest.
As George said, they don't want a well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. Now, why is that? Now, I'm going to use the most benign language possible and frame this as a game, a simple competition between the global public-private partnership and the public. So let's talk about our two teams here. They are fewer in number, but what they lack in number, they make up for in knowledge and wisdom and experience. This sort of organization and infrastructure is not built in a day, right? This takes many generations. They have a continuity of experience that's been passed down from generation to generation. The public, on the other hand, has the numbers, but they lack that continuity of wisdom and information and experience. They struggle to organize themselves at scales large enough to really be much of a challenge here. And this is where the game gets interesting. There is a somewhat symbiotic relationship between these two teams in which the ruling elites benefit from organizing and harnessing the power of the public to construct their global systems. Conversely, the public benefited from the collective wisdom and organizing influence of this ruling class. Each side was simultaneously an asset and the competition. However, due to advances in technology, the ruling elites now have less need for a large public to build and maintain their global systems, and so the public becomes more of a competitor and less of an asset. Conversely, with the advent of the internet and its ability to make greater human experience and wisdom available to the public can now access the generational wisdom previously available only to the elite. So both teams are now less dependent on the strengths of the other. And so the board has been set. The game is a race to see which team will secure control and shape the world to come. It is to the global public-private partnership's strategic advantage to minimize the strengths of the public, which are their numbers and their ability to access the wisdom needed to organize themselves. And it is to the public's strategic advantage to understand and implement humanity's collective wisdom by organizing themselves in ways that can outperform the structures being advanced by the elite. So now, let's use Maslow's hierarchy of needs to look at how this game plays out. For those of you who are new to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the gist of it is this. Down here, you have the physical needs. These are the basic survival needs: food, shelter, and water. And as you secure the basics, you get to unlock access to more and more refined, going all the way up to the highest expressions of beauty, morality, and transcendence. Let's approach this through the perspective of the global public-private partnership. Now, their goal would be to prevent the public from gaining a critical mass of the population to this level of self-actualization, as this is where the public will have access to things like unity and understanding and would be at their most powerful. Now, the elite would deploy their assets to oppose the public's progress at every one of these levels and would want to pollute the information space to cause confusion and contention, making it difficult for the public to unify. They would want to sow discord amongst the people by calling attention to racial, political, and socioeconomic differences. The goal would be to make common ground difficult to find and impossible to maintain. But the greatest return on investment will be to focus on undermining the public's foundation here. Deprive them of clean water, nutrient-dense food, home ownership. Fill them with fear and insecurity. The more progress made by weakening the public at these levels, the easier it will be to deny them access to these higher levels. And from the public's perspective, we simply invert all of that. The public's greatest return on investment will be to secure nutrient-dense food, clean water, housing, and healthcare for as many people as possible. In accomplishing these basic victories here, security and stability will be strengthened. The public's fear will be lessened. They will find friendship and purpose in acquiring these things for one another. Competence and mastery and dignity will follow, and their collective efforts will mature and ripen, bearing the fruits of the moral and beautiful world they claim to desire. Well, I hope this video proves useful to you in understanding a very large, complex situation that we're in, and that you might be able to use this video to support more fruitful conversations with friends and family. Obviously, you understand that it's not as simple as the game framing that I gave it, that it's much more serious than that. We can have a better world. It's not going to be given to us. We're going to have to build it. And really, that's the best way to go about it, because it's through building it that we're going to get the competency needed to keep it, should we win it. It's not impossible. And it's a worthy prize to pursue, don't you think? All right. I'll see you on the next one.